Today we're getting under the hood with Hjalte Tin, a mother, sister, friend, women's advocate, and the co-founder and former CEO and chairwoman of Clue, the most trusted female health app. Clue has more than 10 million active users in over 190 countries. In 2016, Hjalte coined the term Femtech and is now working on a new book about Femtech. She is an active voice in the Femtech community. In June 2024, she created and launched a series of 3 Femtech courses. Hjalte has been featured in major media including the New York Times, New York Magazine, Forbes, Der Spiegel, and Figaro. She has been a speaker at prestigious conferences such as TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco, LeWeb in Paris, Forbes Most Powerful Women in Montreal, Slush in Finland, and many more. Before starting Clue, Hjalte led motorcycle tours around the world for 5 years in the motorcycle touring company MotoMundo. She co-founded with her dad, Hjalte Tin. She guided tours in Mongolia, Cuba, and Vietnam, amongst other destinations. Hjalte attended various art schools in South Africa and London and graduated in 2004 from the Progressive Social Entrepreneurship BA Level Business School, the Chaos Pilots, in Denmark. Hjalte currently lives in Berlin and has 2 children. Welcome, Hjalte.
Thank you so much. It's really fun being here. What an introduction.
So if it's okay, I'd love to get going. I've been asking every woman this, but I think your story, every woman's story is very interesting, but your story, it's really interesting how you were running motorcycle tours around the world and then got into healthcare. What was that inflection point? What made you change and what got you excited about?
I've always been really curious about gender stuff and women's lives and women's history. And at some point in my sort of mid to late 20s, I realized that there had been so little innovation in methods for helping women not get pregnant. And the more I thought about it, the more angry I got. I was like, how is it possible that nobody has cared enough about this space to really innovate in it? My life before, which was very much about sort of soul searching and getting to know myself and having many experiences and finding my place on the planet as a woman, it kind of flew surprisingly natural to think I need to do something about this thing. And I had lived a life where I had somehow always managed to do things that I really cared about. And I had done a lot of motorcycling at that point. I'd spent 2 years riding around the deserts of America or anywhere just dry. And I'd had the motorcycle touring company with my dad. So I'd been riding motorcycles professionally for, I think it was 4 or 5 years. And I also knew that it is dangerous. And I decided that maybe it was smart stopping before I had a really serious accident. And I also wanted to start a family. So there were many things that kind of all came together. And I thought, also I had the idea and the idea just would not leave my head. I could not get it out. So eventually I caved in. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this now.
And I'd love to hear a little bit about the motorcycle experience because that's such an adventure. Do you want to share a little bit about that? Because I would imagine that was sort of.
Yes. It started with me looking in a bookstore. It was this beautiful big coffee table book about deserts. And something just called me so much. I think I had this maybe romantic idea that if I could simplify my life radically down to having almost no possessions on a motorcycle, just me alone in the desert, I would have some sort of, I don't know what I imagine, some sort of great clarity about my life. What I found, however, was that it was incredibly confrontational, actually, to be out there alone with nothing to distract you. It was a little bit like maybe a meditation. You really do have time to think. And when you sit many hours every day, just you and yourself and your thoughts. And you still have to be very alert, right? You have to actually keep your eyes on the road all the time. It's this great combination of being held kind of present while also having the freedom of your mind to just go anywhere it pleases. I loved it. Actually, I loved it so much. And I loved how much sort of on I was because every day I had no idea where I would sleep. I had no idea what would happen. And it gives you a sense of openness to the world that is kind of addictive because I would meet so many people. You will not imagine how many people you can meet in very remote areas. Plenty. And so after 2 years, I realized that if I kept doing that, I would actually never be able to come home. And I kind of forced myself to buy a small flat in Copenhagen, where I'm from, and do that. And then, of course, the second I'd settled there, something else happened and I moved to Berlin. But that's another story.
So as you began on the journey to thinking about Clue and your app, like having that moment, you said that you had this idea, you started thinking about the lack of accessibility. You want to share sort of the journey on that? What was that like?
So I think I had no idea what was ahead. It literally started with me putting a post-it note on my wall where it said, Ida, vision holder. And then I would take all the people I'd ever met and that I had business cards from and put up on the wall and kind of form my imaginary team, like people that I thought maybe in some capacity could help me with this crazy idea. I don't think I ever actually contacted any of these people, but it gave me this sense of like there is a path forward. And then I just started, but I actually had a meeting with a venture capitalist firm in Copenhagen at the technical university really, really soon, and shared my idea and got feedback. I had no idea what I said because I had nothing. I only had an idea. But then, you meet the next person who help you one step further and you clarify your idea a little bit more and this and that happened. And suddenly, a decade has passed and many things has happened. So it really was just taking one step and then taking the next. Everything happened. I met a man that became the dad to my children.
I think it's amazing that you were able to go from that to where you are. So you said a decade of a journey. Can you share a little bit about that experience? You started there. How did it unfold?
Meeting the co-founders, him and three more guys, was an important step along the way. And then we raised the first angel money. I think we raised 10,000 euros. So very little, but just enough to do pay the legal fees for starting the company. And then we were out of money immediately after having founded the company. So then we went on to raise more angel capital. We raised 3 million in total before doing our first institutional round with a venture capital firm. We were scrambling from the beginning. We didn't have a technical co-founder. Well, we had, but he left after 3 months because he had earned 5x the amount we could give him at Apple just before. So that he had bought a flat. That didn't work. So we lost him. And so we were scrambling with like freelancers to even put the app together to launch at our launch date. And then after that, we managed to, hire the first team member and the second one. And then we could build a backend. And then we found somebody who could actually help us grow the app. And slowly, and then realizing, because the first idea was actually to build a piece of hardware. I wanted to build a little machine that could measure hormones in real time based on saliva. And we tried to build that for 4 years while also building the period tracking app, because that was a very smart insight of my co-founder. He said, hardware is hard. Why don't we also start building a period tracking app? Then we'll start building a user base, understand the space. And that was very smart thinking. One, because we ended up not being able to build the hardware. And two, because we learned that we could actually do the same just with data without the hardware. So that was a better user experience. And we learned along the way we could do so many powerful things with the app. And then eventually we got FDA clearance as the world's first 100% data-driven type of birth control. So that was a big sort of milestone in my system because method is so close to heart. I still think it's one of the most underserved and one of the biggest opportunities in female health. And then at that point, I was ready to actually pass on leadership to two amazing women that I hired from inside the team who became co-CEOs. It was amazing. I loved going to work every day, but it was also very hard. I had a very difficult relationship to my partner. That I'll be transparent and say that when we went our separate ways 3 years ago, that was a good thing. When I think back of all these years and having two children along the way, so being, a mother of small kids while raising all this money and building this team and all of that, it was really tough. It was, but also the most amazing job I could ever imagine to have had because it is such a gift that you have this idea that you care so deeply about. And then you get other people to spend their precious life energy on it. That is just, I mean, how lucky can you be? I don't take that for granted. I'm deeply humbled that so many people wanted to spend their time and energy on this vision. In a startup, you have a new job every day. Literally, every day there was something I had to do for the first time. That was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? It better work.
Were you excited about the challenge? You're like, how am I going to do it? But at the same time, it wasn't there something like exciting about being able to handle it and to make it happen?
Yes, I mean, I love that it was so diverse. But it's a little bit like having kids. You do a lot of things that actually aren't that fun, and then somehow it all adds up to something pretty meaningful. There are many things about my role that I didn't love. I have never loved raising money. But even that, you grow with the task, and I think that was what felt good. And one of the reasons why I decided to step back, other than maybe the board was like, hey, this business getting serious, maybe we need a more serious CEO, I don't know. But it was also the sense that I would have to keep learning every day to still be a good CEO. And the things I could see I would have to learn didn't excite me so much. There would be more Excel sheets in my life going ahead than there were before. And I do not like Excel sheets. So I was like, nah, the second the learning curve was not attractive, I was like, no, you bring the energy to this thing every day. At every meeting, you're the one who somehow tries to keep the bar really high. And towards the end, I noticed that I was actually not the one setting the bar the highest. And I was like, this is not working. Like, that does not work. Like, you cannot care just even a millimeter less than the people around you. You have to care the most. So what happened after was that I decided to just say no to everything. And it ended up being 2 years. And then I opened my inbox and I thought I would become an artist or something else. But then I found out that I was still very much interested in femtech and actually, then started just saying yes to everything. And that has brought me all around the globe, literally the last year and a half. And it's been very interesting to me.
I'm curious because you coined the term femtech. So talk a little bit about that.
What sparked the thought was that I was invited to this conference, TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco, and they were doing the first panel ever on female health, scheduled early in the morning after the big party, but nevertheless. And I was doing research to see who the other panelists were and how they were describing what they were building, because I could sense that we were like neighbors, but I found it quite difficult to find the right language for what we're doing because we would say period tracker and it just didn't cover it. And then I had the thought, what if we had one term that could show that we are part of this really interesting big thing happening in the technology sector and in culture? And I thought if we had a term, we would not be perceived as these weirdos out on the fringes doing niche, in quotation mark, things. And we would also be able to find each other and people could find us. And also, very practically, I had been in so many pitch situations where I knew the person I'm pitching to now is going to have to pitch this idea on Monday at the partner meeting. And that person is not going to like saying period tracking app. This person will like a lot more saying femtech. So I thought this will make it easier. Let's put some oil in the system. And so what I did was that I was running around before this panel at this conference, like tapping people on the shoulder who were building something. I'd be like, excuse me, like I have this idea to coin this term. Would you feel comfortable if your company was labeled under or like put in this category? And like mini micro user research. And I got positive response. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. So then I suggested it from stage. And then my co-founder, he was very smart. He said, we should trademark this word so nobody can take it and use it just for themselves. And we'll make it so that everybody can use it. And we then also wrote a Wikipedia post so that we could I guess we could take the claim or whatever the right word is. So, I mean, he was a good marketeer. I hadn't had the thought, but now in retrospect, I think that was helpful because it really does feel like a social movement in some ways. And I think for people to know where does it come from? What are the roots? Who came up with this is helpful.
As you talk about, yeah, period tracker. But when you look at femtech, the technology around it is just fantastic. So, so you've been doing that. You're writing a book now. Talk about that.
Yes. Yes. So actually, the day I stepped down, I started writing. I definitely had a lot in my mind and system, and it was somewhat processing, but I also felt a need to say, hey, well, like we need to really talk about what technology is doing in the world. And I felt that there were so few people who told their own founding story while also putting it into context of like societal questions like how does venture capital work? Like what it's a broken system. Let's talk about that. And many other things. So what happened then was that I wrote a proposal that was wildly creative. It turns out it needs to be a very certain format. I got somebody to help me, streamlined it, made it a proper proposal. That took forever because I was busy with life. And then I found an agent in the US because I thought I really want this book to come out in America. I wrote it in English. I want all the people building technology and forming the world and setting the tone, which America in many ways are. And then the feedback that has been coming is either you don't have enough social media followers on Instagram or TikTok, which is true because I don't have any. But it's kind of mind blowing that the publishing houses, I think it's the sector in a lot of crisis, are choosing the authors who have their own sales channels. So my book has not found a publisher yet, which is frustrating because I think it would be helpful. I hope, I think, for people who are in this sector to read and beyond. But it has also made me think a lot about how does ideas actually matter? Like how do you make them matter in the world? How do you share them? My contract with this agent runs out in June, and then I have many ideas what I will use this material for in some other format that feels more interactive, maybe faster. And just one final thought on that, it has felt very parallel to raising money because what happened was that we would go out, I would sit across some people, usually men, and in my mind, I knew that I had literally 10,000s of emails from women who have said, this has been helpful, useful. And I would sit across this person who would said, is this really a thing? Like, nah. It's like, is this important? Like, isn't like, why do you need this? And this disconnect was so much to keep in my system because it's like, how do you bridge these two worlds and make this person across the table comprehend that there's a set of life experiences that this person doesn't have, and somehow make them humble enough to understand that there's something they don't understand. And I feel very similar now where the publishers are like, you don't have name recognition enough, or you're not American enough, or, they say the story is great, but it's like it doesn't have commercial value or enough commercial value. While I have literally people every day saying, when is this book coming out? I'd love to read it. And it's like, how do I, it's just so strange in some way and also very understandable. But so that's where the book is.
And I think that you hit the nail on the head with really what is your reach, your influence. And I think it's a shame that when that's what matters, also thinking about self-publishing potentially, if you have that power.
Yeah.
That's one of the discussions I've been having with one of my friends is, if this doesn't, she's in the best possible position. If this doesn't happen, self-publish. So a lot of people take that angle. It seems like the content itself will be a fantastic offering. And I love the fact that, I mean, in your intro, you talked about the fact that you launched a series of 3 workshops around Femtech. What was that like in June?
Well, the thing was, so the idea was to do one for people who are curious about the femtech industry, because I get so many people who say, I'm working, as a professional, but in some other sector, but I'm really curious about femtech. Like, how could I start? Or people who have already started their early stage and there are so many questions, or people who are later stage who really need support because it just gets harder and harder in some way. And I was like, I think I could help with these different things. And I made the courses, I put them up, and then I realized it stressed me out like crazy. So much that I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this. I actually don't want to do this. I paid all the money back to people that signed up and canceled them. Yeah, I still don't know really what it was, but there was something about that that really stressed me. And it was so liberating that I could just be like, you know what? No, that was a mistake. I don't want to do this. And then just not do it.
I think it's great that you recognize that you just didn't have the capacity to do it. And there's nothing embarrassing about that. Ensuring that you're being true to your authentic self in that moment and what you could do.
I think as a CEO and as a founder, you constantly do things that you don't really want to do, but you have to do. and also things that feel scary. You do them over and over. And what I realized was that I think I have a passion for creating things. I really do. I have a and even creating something as sort of fluffy as cultural change absolutely excites me. Would love to do things that can scale. I think that was part of my sort of like I can do these things. And I have done courses before and I know that they can be valuable to people, but there was something about this scale that just I would never be able to do enough. I think that was the feeling I had. And it's not to discredit people doing courses. I'm doing online courses myself. They're extremely valuable, but it just wasn't my thing. Having learned that I don't have to do things I don't want to do.
As a CEO, there's many things we have to do, and many scary things and many good things. And so I'm wondering, like, so as you're writing the book, is the book finished, by the way?
Yeah, it is. It's been kind of finished for years. It's just sitting there. I mean, I know that the second you have an editor, for sure, you will go over the book and you will add things and so on. But plus minus, it's pretty much done. Yeah.
So what are you doing these days? So you've coined Femtech, you've written the book. Like, where's your head at? What do you want to explore?
I would love to figure out how to make the world realize that investing into women's health is a really smart investment thesis. It's good for economy. It makes our planet healthier. And there is so much data showing that investing into women's health is really good business for investors, for societies, for the planet, like on all levels, it's really smart. And yet there is so little money flowing that way. So I'm working on a think tank, build that argument for all to see. It's very simple, and yet it's not common knowledge, I think. So I'd love to do that. And now with the learning from the book process, I'm thinking about how you do something that feels kind of consumer facing. I think I'm approaching it a little bit more like how do you build a social movement? How can you make some it very like open so other people can participate and think of it as a bridge builder? Because what's funny is some think tanks, they're working, where they have very clear opponents, the chemical industry doesn't want no or something. But in female health, it's not somebody saying we don't want this. It's just that nobody has it, or well, not enough people have it on top of their minds. It really is a movement for something. And it's really about raising awareness and getting people excited about it and getting people excited about the business opportunity as well. That's what I'm working on. And now when I look back, I can see that in some very unorganized way, the last year and a half really has been research for that because I've met so many people in all corners of the ecosystem, from the early stage entrepreneur all the way to the German investment bank or, funds and funds of funds and investors. And so I think I have soon my actual map on the wall of people I've met and know, and I think maybe would be interested in some way or another be part of this. But I'm not quite ready to press the start button because I also know that once I do that, it will be all consuming. And I love not being so busy right now. I really do. It's like life is opening up. I look at a lot of art. My boyfriend is a painter. We talk so much about art, his art. Like I just love that openness in life. So it's part of my design process right now. It's like, how do I do this without it eating me?
And so I think it's wonderful that you're giving yourself that space to figure that out. Well, how do you see this next phase? Like, do you imagine this part of your life more balance focused?
So here in Germany, when people get divorced, well, we were not married. When people split up, but have children, sometimes the children will stay in the house and the parents move in and out. I don't know if that's also a thing in America. It probably is. We call it the nest model. So we have had that for 3 years, and I'm quite ready to change that. That is not as easy as it sounds. So actually, I'm spending a fair amount of my energy kind of rebuilding my personal life as well into a better form. And I recognize that some creation takes kind of peace of mind to really be able to happen. And I have just had so much like that I'm still struggling to create. Oh, yeah, struggling, I guess is a fair word. I'm still in the process of creating that calmness actually. So my future dream is to have had that all sorted out and be able to create a life where it doesn't disturb, where that whole thing doesn't disturb. Right now it's really disturbing, and free all that energy up to create again. I am longing, I'm desperate to get to that point, but it takes time. But the good thing is that while I this is all happening, I have still been able to work in this sort of more kind of random way, but still all within Femtech. So, I mean, life has just offered me all these opportunities to, I've been to Japan twice and to Armenia twice and Australia this year. And I don't know, just all kind of Spain and Slovenia and Lithuania. So I've been very active, but it's a different kind of active when you're not creating in a sense. So I have thoroughly enjoyed this year and a half as well of lots of activity, but in a different way. And I have learned so much. But I'm learning about myself as well. It's like, no, I do love when everything you do kind of stack on top of each other and you're building something.
But I think as well, what I'm hearing from this conversation is having coined the phrase femtech and really building on that and being able to go out and share your vision and your experiences and all of that around the world. I mean, that's really a wonderful thing for both women to hear and the industry to hear, for men to hear. Back to your comment around your think tank and the notion of building and really making sure that women's health, like investment, continues to grow in women's health. So I think that that's really, I applaud you for that. And I think even though it feels less tangible, it's like that sort of ripple effect of what you're doing, which is really powerful. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that, Ida. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. No, I mean, I had not imagined what one word can actually do. And it's something that was happening in the world and is happening, and probably somebody else would have called it something. I mean, the energy of this thing happening is not dependent on that word existing. It becomes this grain that something can crystallize around where people can put their energy. And I am blown away, really, of what the power of one word can be. I mean, it's a bit like the Me Too movement, right? Or like it's of course because it's ripe in culture. It's just waiting to happen. Feels just very lucky, honestly, that that word came just at that time, and it brings me in contact with the world in this way. I just feel lucky. I think that's the best way I can put it.
But you were also the person who was going to bring it in. It was like kind of predestined. But
Oh,
anyway,
can I say something to that? Sorry, just really briefly, because it was so interesting. Because when I then came out of my 2 years of not doing anything, the world was reflecting a different rollback on me. It was really interesting. And I thought I was going to do something else, but it was clear that the world wanted something from me in this femtech world. And I thought, okay, I'll do that. Like if that's being asked of me, I'll do that. I mean, I also love it, but it was this sense of like being of service. It was very tangible. Like the world wanted me to do this. I'm like, okay, I'll do this.
you did, it happened. And so whether it was luck, I'm not so sure about that. But I'm curious, this has been, your story is so fascinating. But I'm curious, if you were to give a message to women around the world, what would you want to share with them, Ida?
Women are so strong. And I think part of our strength is that we are very good at adjusting to the emotional space around us. I really feel that the world needs women to take more space and actually use their anger and be more clear and say, no, I don't want this, or I need this. There are good reasons why we don't do that because it comes with a very high price. And we have different possibility to say yes or no in different parts of the world and in different roles. But usually we have more space to also say when something doesn't fit us. And I really would love women to use that power that they have. I think women have much more power than they realize, and anger is important. I mean, I have a 10-year-old daughter. Oh my God, what she can get through when she shows her anger, she is very, very clear, and she's extraordinarily willful. And often I've held her a little bit as a role model. I've been like, wow, if I had stood up and taken more fights in my career, you know what? I would have been better off. I'm not saying that we should become emotionally sort of stumped or unintelligent or unkind, but there are two kinds of anger. The one that is just like kind of response, like, reactive and crazy, wild, like not helpful. But there's also one that creates space for us. So yeah, there's a great book on this called Rage Becomes Her. I forget the author, but if you want a little support to find your rage and use it in a good way, that's a good book.
Thank you, Edith, so much for sharing your story, for getting under the hood, for being vulnerable and yourself. This is an awesome conversation.
Thank you so much for doing this and spending your energy on creating this space for us. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Under the Sisterhood. If you haven't already, please give us a quick rating and review on Apple or Spotify. And make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn so you can hear from more amazing women. This podcast is created and hosted by Under the Sisterhood LLC and Elizabeth Elfenbein, produced by Elizabeth Elfenbein and Matt Butler, and edited by Matt Butler. The music is by Ayla Schaefer. Her song, Rose.